Scenic America never really took on this issue, but it is such an important issue these days. It's really a challenge across the country. And what surprised us is that this visionary group 50 years ago said, put these wires underground. And here we are 50 years later, and we're still saying, put the wires underground. And what's happened is the answer has always been the same. It was the same 50 years ago, and it's the same today. It's too expensive. It's too expensive. Well, it can be done. I love this photo. It's in your book, of New York City, 1880 to 1920. And hey, if they can do it in New York City, they can do it anywhere, just like that song, because it's the quality of life and aesthetics, and that's what we've always been promoting. And I think that was largely the reason they were doing it back 50 years ago. But in the meantime, we have seen the devastating impact of not doing it. And, from cars crashing into telephone poles and electric poles, utility poles, as we widen our roads, we get closer and closer to these poles. We're dealing with infrastructure that is really old in our urban areas particularly. And when we talk to utility companies and we say, well, can you start to do this? Oh, no. But they're doing it out in the suburbs. They're doing it in new developments. And they're all patting themselves on the back saying, yeah, well, we're undergrounding. So they're investing money in new developments, but they're not taking any of that money and investing it back in the infrastructure of the city. And yet, everybody pays the same. At least in Pennsylvania, and I would like to study now that I've learned that, in Pennsylvania, every user of this utility pays the same usage rate. And so whether or not they only use a few watts or a lot of watts, they're paying this usage fee every month, and that money is invested in other infrastructure. So I think it is, when you talk about social justice, I think there's really a social injustice there when we look at our poorest neighborhoods not having the benefit of the beauty and a safer neighborhood, because these things are underground. So I tell you, I really got caught up in the photos, because you can just Google underground wiring, crashes, ice storms, and so I did put a lot of these in here because it was something I could share with you. We have tornadoes that come through. We have of course, I talked about there are a lot of crash pictures on there, by the way. But this one I love. It's ice storms. Isn't that great? I mean, it's a great photo, but just think about what that did. This was back in Maine. What was it? Max, you around? Max told me. The Great Ice Storm of '98. And, here are the people that come to fix it, but how many of them, they come from all over the country when one of these storms comes in, and it's like, but in the meantime, you've lost your refrigerator, your freezer, you don't have heat, your mother-in-law is freezing, and she's in a place where you can't even get to. So I think we have to go beyond just fixing these things and think about how do we make it not happen anymore. And one of the things I learned, because we're in the Northeast, and we don't have the fire problem, but what I found out is out west, huge problem with having these utility poles, because it actually caused forest fires. So there's a whole new energy, no pun intended, to actually put these things underground out west. So you can kind of see how these things just catch on there. I thought this was a great photo. And so to get back to the whole idea of the cost and why we don't want to, that our utility companies don't want to spend the money. And what we realized is that we don't really know what it costs on the other side. There's no one there figuring out what the impact is on lost businesses, lost residents, use, that what the the impact is in fixing all those poles that come down. How much does it cost when the ice storm comes in and for 20 or 100, a couple 100,000 people, millions of people don't have use of electricity for such a long time. And we are recommending that we start to find out what that costs and put it together. Because regardless of whatever it costs, we think the quality of life and the safety, the health of people living in our country is priceless. And since 1965, there's also been new technology that has been developed. This is a machine that there's a group in Florida called Undergrounding 2020, and this little machine actually can go down and it can find other utilities. That's one of the things they say. Well, we don't want to. There's already utilities. We don't want to damage other utilities. It can be really a serious problem. Well, this little machine can go in there in a matter of minutes and find out what's there and work around it. And so another one of our recommendations is that not only should we be putting these things underground, but whenever they are putting anything underground, there should be co-location, so that when, I know in Philadelphia, they're digging up the streets all the time to put more new cables in. Well, at the same time, why not work with the cable companies and the power companies and at least set it up for the future to be able to do undergrounding and give them a few years to do that. I'm going to end to, this is a huge problem now that a lot of people in this audience are facing. And so I'd like Sharee to come up and tell us what is going on in Virginia, in Jamestown, and this is the kind of thing they want to put in Jamestown along their most beautiful rivers. Okay, and this is another one in Montana. So I did talk to this man, Frederick Murphy. This will be in our paper. He's an expert in this area. He was not able to come. Found out a lot of good information about how things are funded. And one of the last things, just in ending, is I think we need to be talking to our public utility commissions, because it has to be a collective effort between the policymakers, the regulators, and the utilities to affect any kind of change. And so we need to learn about what they're doing, how the system works, and get our foot in the door to make the change. Thank you very much.
So I'm Sharee Williamson. My name's hard, I know. I'm with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I'm one of the lawyers at the Trust. And I'm going to come at the utility undergrounding issue from the perspective of large-scale transmission lines, rather than some of those pictures that you saw there, which are the issue of the more local transmission lines. So the National Trust has been focusing our efforts in two places recently, at the James River in Virginia. Thank you. At the James River in Virginia, and also in New Hampshire. In both of these cases, undergrounding can be part of the solution, as can rerouting, to avoid the most scenic and important historic and cultural sites. On the James, which is what you see here, we've been working in coalition with organizations, including Scenic Virginia, to oppose a proposal by Dominion Virginia Power to build a transmission line that would be visible from Jamestown Island, Colonial Parkway, which is part of Colonial National Park, the National Historic Landmark Site, Carter's Grove Plantation, and the Keystone segment of the first ever water trail designated by Congress under the National Trail System Act, which is the Captain John Smith Chesapeake National Historic Trail. The proposed line would include 17 towers that are up to 295 feet tall, that you would be able to see from Black Point, from the tip of Jamestown Island. Additionally, the line would cross a section of the James where there are currently no overhead crossings of the river for over 50 miles. For a river on the east coast of the United States, that's remarkable. This river segment is listed in the nationwide rivers inventory under the Federal Wild and Scenic River Act, and it's designated under Virginia's Scenic River Act for its historic and scenic beauty. Despite the significance of this landscape, concerns about the costs of construction are being used to justify selecting this alternative. Meanwhile, in New Hampshire, the proposed Northern Pass transmission line would cross through the entire state. Its goal is to transmit hydropower from Canada to markets further south. As a result of public interest and outcry and a lot of advocacy from a lot of committed organizations, this summer, the project applicant revised their proposal to include burial of an additional 50 miles, which would avoid impacting the White Mountains. The photos you see here are of the presidential range of the White Mountains, and this porch view is from a historic hotel, which is the Mountain View Grand in Whitesfield. So that's a good result for the White Mountains, but we've still got the rest of the state that's going to be faced with basically a visual barrier that goes across the entire landscape and through a lot of areas that have never been properly surveyed for scenic or historic resources. So the trust has been in both the James River and the New Hampshire fights now for a few years, and we've learned a few things, and some of them are things that are reflected in the white paper from Scenic America, and also some of the themes that we've heard speakers talk about today. The biggest one would be the power of working in coalition. For the James River, we've been working with groups that have environmental concerns, conservation concerns, scenic concerns, and it's been really helpful to have people from all of these perspectives pushing on the same issue. We've been working in a down-to-the-wire coalition where we say, save the James, stop the power lines, and it's given us something all to unite behind. Another thing that is a lesson that we've learned is the need to have objective information on project costs and alternatives. You need that both to make your case to the public for why this is important, and also to make the case to the regulators that are making the decisions. And as Mary said, it's hard to find that information at this point. Most of it comes from the applicants that are proposing these large transmission lines. So it's also become clear that to effectively influence these decisions, you have to be knowledgeable about the intersection of state, federal, and sometimes even local laws that affect the transmission line siting process. In Virginia, one of the things that is currently preventing the transmission line from being constructed is actually the need for local zoning approval from James City County. At the state level, we've learned that there is little consistency across state laws in making siting decisions. One bright spot is actually in New Hampshire, where this year the Site Evaluation Committee, which is the state committee that's responsible for reviewing transmission line permit requests, has been going through a rule review process to update their siting requirements. The National Trust and many other organizations have participated in this rulemaking process, and we're hopeful that it's going to result in more thoughtful decisions in New Hampshire that take scenic, historic, and environmental resources better into account at the front end of project planning. I'll close by saying that the issue of large transmission lines crossing historic and scenic landscapes is not going to go away. As a result, largely, of our long overdue national shift to cleaner energy sources, there's an increasing need for large voltage transmission lines to move power from where it's generated to where it's used. It's not only possible, though, but it's imperative that groups like Scenic America and the people who have assembled today work to develop approaches that help support this shift to clean energy, but also recognize the value of preserving scenic, historic, and environmental resources. Thank you.